Hey friends, this is Marilyn from tarotclarity.com, and today's video is on a current item that's in the news regarding young Sebastian Rogers, a 15-year-old young man who disappeared from Hendersonville, Tennessee, his home in Hendersonville, Tennessee. Now, I'm trying just to stick to facts, and it's really hard to know what some facts are with these cases because there are so many rumors and innuendos and then false claims put out there. And I'm trying to use, news sources that are vetted rather than, YouTube sources. Not that YouTube people aren't good, because I do follow a lot of cases, using YouTube, people, but you don't always get vetted information. So I just want to be very careful. I have a timeline, which I'll share here, and then I'll mention a few of the things that I've heard that I'm not sure if they're true or not. On February 25th, the young man was last seen with his mother, at least, and perhaps a few family members at a restaurant. Presumably, he and his mother went home the evening of the 25th. They have a nice house, a nice-sized house, about 3,000 square feet, and it's a one-story house. So for 3,000 square feet to be on one floor, it's a good sprawl. I mean, this house that I'm in is about the same, and I know that there's a big difference in space between our master bedroom and our guest bedrooms. So I can understand and see how you might not be able to hear what's going on from one bedroom to the other in a space that large. Apparently, when the mother woke up the next day, it was determined that he seemed to have been barefoot. He doesn't seem to have, all his shoes have been accounted for. They're all in the house. And it seems as though there's a flashlight that was missing, which might become interesting a little later on. On February 26th, an endangered child alert was issued by Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. He was supposedly wearing black sweatshirts, a black sweatshirt, black sweatpants, and his glasses. Sumner County Emergency Management Agency dispatched 200 people to search, multiple K-9 teams included, and they did helicopter searches and they used drones. On February 27th, an amber alert was issued. On the 29th, a local pond was drained and nothing was found. Search and rescue dogs were unable to pick up Sebastian's scent. March 2nd, a cash reward was issued. March 4th, the search was scaled back. Nothing suggested that Sebastian met with foul play. March 7th, a local landfill was searched in White Plains, was searched in White Plains, Kentucky, not a local one, where the neighborhood that he lived in, where their trash would have been taken, and nothing was found. On March 10th, his biological father, whose name is Seth Rogers, says his son was not prone to wandering off, and definitely not without his shoes. Apparently, when he was younger, he went outside barefoot and he was attacked by fire ants, and so he made it a point of always wearing shoes. So Seth says that there's no way that he would have gone outside without shoes, unless he was trying to escape an intolerable situation. That's what the bio father says. March 14th, home security video shows lights flashing outside of the family home, like flash, 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 around 3:10 in the morning, the same morning that Sebastian went missing. This is interesting because if you recall, one of the things that was missing from the house when they realized Sebastian left was that a flashlight was missing. March 25th, mother and stepfather speak in interviews, including an appearance on Nancy Grace's YouTube channel. And I did watch that, and she did grill them mercilessly. But they seem to have held up to her interrogation. In fact, as a result of that interview, I watched other YouTube channels who were body language experts and experts in watching how people handle themselves under duress, and they all said that they handled themselves without appearing to be lying. April 3rd, eyeglasses were found, which were suspected to have been Sebastian's, but it turned out they were not his. Now, I don't have the dates for this, but at some point, it came out that the stepfather who lived with the mother's name is Katie Proudfoot. Her husband is Chris Proudfoot. And it came out that Chris was not even home when the child went missing. Apparently he works out of state and he spends his overnights at a trailer park somewhere, to be convenient for going to work. It also came out that, Chris was married 5 times, which I guess is not the best endorsement of a family kind of guy, kind of casts shade on his personality. But, there are many of us who've been married multiple times. I've been married twice. I haven't been married 5 times, but, after a couple of times of being married, you look towards yourself and say, well, maybe something I did wasn't good, But a lot has been made of him, having been married 5 times. One of his ex-wives, her name was Nina, and I watched this on a YouTube channel, came out to say that he was abusive towards their daughter. Now, Nina and Chris Proudfoot are currently embroiled in what appears to be a contentious and nasty child custody case. So, it was a grand opportunity probably for her to come out and speak her piece. And her perspective is that he was abusive, which may be true. I'm not saying it's not. And she went on and spoke at length about all the things that he did to wrong her and how abusive he was toward their daughter. But she definitely spilled the beans, suggesting that Chris Proudfoot was an abusive husband and an abusive man. The public, as a result, I think, really sided with Nina because, it's the Proudfoots, Katie and Chris's behavior doesn't seem to gel with what most people think would be appropriate. For example, they've left their home. They're not staying at that house anymore. Most people are like, how could your child be missing and you leave the house? They say it's because the public has become so hostile towards them and they've gotten so many death threats that they felt it was necessary to leave the area and go elsewhere. I'm not going to judge them or call them out on anything like that because I don't know, God forbid, how I would be if, I got death threats myself, They started acting towards the Proudfoots the way the public started acting towards the Laundries, if you recall the Gabby Petito case. Now, as it turns out, the Laundries were culpable, to some degree. They definitely knew that something was going down, and so they kind of were hateful people. And so that's the same kind of treatment that this family is getting as a result of this case. Another thing is the stepfather's parents, who are not biologically connected to this young man. Now, they have been his step grandparents for about 7 years. I think the boy's been in their life for about 7 years. But they had a pre-arranged cruise or trip to Alaska, and they didn't cancel the trip. They went on the trip, you know. Now, some people are like, oh, that's outrageous and stuff like that, which, God forbid if anybody in my family, you know, especially, you know, anybody that I felt deeply connected to, especially if they were blood, if something were to happen, and I shudder at the thought, I believe that I would cancel the trip. However, they aren't his biological people. They may not really have much of a relationship with the boy. You know, they may not really be that close of a family. I don't know. I know from my own experience a couple of years ago, my husband and I planned a crossing from, you know, the U.S. to the U.K. on the Queen Mary 2. And it got the ship line canceled it because of COVID, you know, so we got all our money back. There was no, you know, nothing lost. So then we rescheduled it when COVID was over and we could do it again. And so we decided we're going to do this crossing, you know. So we planned this crossing. We bought all the insurance, you know, if it, God forbid, there's a reason we have to cancel the trip. We paid through the nose for this insurance, you know, and we paid for deluxe suites, you know, and accommodations because we figured we're old and, you know, how many more grand events will we have? So we paid through the nose for this trip. I mean, in the dozens of thousands of dollars, right? And we had insurance. And then it realized that my husband, you know, discovered that he had cancer. And so we did not want to delay his treatment. And so we canceled the trip. And I share all of this because even with insurance, we lost a lot of money. We got some back. We got something back, but it was a fraction of what we put out. So we took a big hit. So I'm saying this in defense of these people who may or may not really have been very close to this child. And maybe they didn't have a lot of money to lose, you know, and so they decided to go on this trip, you know. I'm not, you know, a lot of people are just like, how could they possibly do that, you know, but I'm cutting them some slack on that. I don't know how close they were to this young man, you know. At any rate, what else is put out there? The biological father, Seth, has painted has been painted as a saint, but it's been brought out that he has been accused of child A himself. So even though he's like fully engaged and involved with searching and stuff like that, and he's been available, and he's thrown shade at the other couple, he also has some dirt, you know, in his own closet. And that seems to be all that seems to be known about what's been going down. So it's been February 25th, he disappeared in the evening of February 25th or the 26th. And here it now is April something. I don't even know what today's date is. April 4th, maybe? April 4th. And the child's still missing. And there's no signs and there's no clues and there's no anything about what happened to him. Now, when I first heard the story, I was interested, and I've been following. I don't follow a lot of them, you know, because I can't get myself sucked in because it's just, it takes a toll on me, you know, spiritually and emotionally. But this one, I kind of got sucked into for a few reasons. One, my family hit the autism jackpot, you know, with genetics, you know. There are multiple members of my family, immediate family, with autism. My mother was autistic. At least one of her siblings, I think two, were autistic. Out of, I think, 6 first cousins, at least 4 are significantly on the spectrum, although high functioning. One of those 6 is not high functioning. In my own family, I have a brother who I mentioned in the past, who I am the power of attorney for medically and financially. I am his person in charge of his life. He is severely autistic, he's a savant in some ways. He has a memory like you wouldn't believe. So he's not stupid, but he can't really function in society. He needs a protector. He can't function. And so I have him. I have another sibling who is definitely on the spectrum, high functioning, but he has difficulty in life. I have a nephew who is like my one brother who is severely autistic. Now, my nephew, things are different than they were in the 60s. So now there are programs for young men and young women who have this condition, and they can excel in their areas of strength. And so this young man is doing exceedingly well, but he himself has to have someone be in charge of him. He has to be part of a team that is, taking care of him. I have reason to believe that I'm on the spectrum, although I'm not autistic, but I have tendencies, and I have at least one child who definitely has tendencies a little more severe than myself. So, there's no lack of individuals in my family with autism or on the spectrum. So it's a situation, it's a condition that I'm very, very familiar with. And as a matter of fact, with 3 grandchildren, don't kid yourself, we're constantly observing these children, out of concern to see what traits, if any, they may develop. So my heart goes out for this young man, and, I'm touched by his story because he is autistic, high functioning autistic, but I think to the degree that he goes to special school, and he needs, he needs protection. He's somebody that is a vulnerable person in society. So I am particularly attracted to this story for those reasons. Now, there's also a possibility that he was abused. It's not a fact. It's we don't know for a fact. We only hear what the ex-wife had to say, and that could have been, the ex-wife having her opportunity to sabotage her ex-husband and to get custody of their child. That's a distinct possibility, although most people seem to believe her story, and I'm not saying she's not speaking the truth, but just because there's a contentious divorce, between 2 individuals doesn't mean that the person she spilled the goods on is exactly how she describes. It's hearsay, of course, Now, when I first heard the story, my thought was that my instincts, if I had a moment flash through me, was that the child left, that he had had enough. Perhaps he felt like he was 15, so he was a teenager, plus he was a teenager with special needs, and so maybe he felt like he was not being fairly treated. Or, I remember being 15 and having a lot of run-ins with my parents who were extremely strict. And I asked today, when I visited my autistic brother, the one that I am responsible for, and I see him regularly, I asked him, when you were young and you felt mommy and daddy were being unfair to you, did you ever run away? And he said, yes, I did. And I didn't know that because I was already in college, and I wasn't living there. But he said, yeah, I ran away. Now, I asked him for information, but because of who he is, he just was like, I'm not telling you my business, so I couldn't get the goods out from him as much as I tried to get the information from him, because I wanted to know what you did, like what he did, like how did he go about it, but he wouldn't speak on the topic, but he did admit that he did run away. So I think a young person like that, they're all different, everyone in my family is different. I mean, some of us are doctors, or attorneys, high functioning, some work in the government, high responsible jobs, engineer, extremely successful individuals. But, they have this problem, this tendency. I don't want to call it a problem, but it can be a problem because it can pose challenges in one's life, when you have interpersonal skill problems with, interpersonal relationship issues, which some of them do. But anyway, my brother did say, yeah, I definitely tried to run away. My first thought, which is why I asked my brother, if he ever ran away, because I wanted to know if somebody who is considered, high functioning, autistic would run away. Now, my brother is not high functioning. He's, as I mentioned, he could not survive in the real world, which is why I take care of him. I'm the responsible adult in his life. So anyway, my instincts were good because I think that the young man probably ran away. My intellect, or my, whoever I am, when I put it all together, initially when I heard the story, I thought, oh, he ran away. He tried to escape a situation. Now, his parents and his stepfather all claim that he has no access to the internet, but I don't think they should fool themselves, because I think young people, especially if they're gifted in some areas, just because he's autistic doesn't mean he's not gifted or is particularly savvy when it comes to video games and how to manipulate the internet. I think it's distinctly possible that he had formed a friendship with somebody online. In his mind, maybe it was somebody he felt was his friend. Now, I know with my brother, I'll call him Sammy, the one who's severely autistic. Everybody's his friend, which is why after my mother died, I allowed for him to live in her house for a year after her death, because I wanted to give him a chance to live, a normal life, taking care of himself. And every week for 18 months, I traveled back and forth to her house from my house. It was a 60-mile round, 60-mile each way trip. And I would go and I would take him grocery shopping. I would take him to all his doctor appointments. I just went once a week to check in on him and make sure everything was good. But I realized at some point, it was only really a matter of time before he friended somebody who understood that he was living in that house, alone. And I realized, within that 18-month period that, God forbid, anything could happen to him. Anybody could take advantage of him. There were neighbors who knew him and kept an eye out for him. And I would sometimes get phone calls, you need to come out here, or you need to touch base with him. But it became clear to me that I didn't, I wanted to give him a chance, like I said, but it became clear to me that I didn't want anything bad to happen to him, because everybody's his friend. And then anybody who's nice to him or says hello to him becomes his friend, because he was treated so badly in school in the 60s. He was mainstreamed because in those days, there were some special schools or special programs, but for the most part, that was when they said mainstream the kids, so he went to mainstream. He was mainstreamed, and the typical children were merciless with him, really, really mean. Really mean. So anybody who was nice to him by just saying hello was his friend. So that's how he is to this day. He's in his 60s, and that person's my friend, but now he's in a controlled environment. He's in a facility that takes care of him 24/7. And anytime anything is done for him, I get a phone call to give permission, and etc. So he's in a good place now. But at any rate, getting back to Sebastian, I mention all that because if anybody befriended him online who wasn't a good person, the youngster may believe they were his friend, you know. And when I heard about the flashlight being missing and the possibility that there could have been some kind of, hey, I'm taking off now, you know, I'm running away, I can't stand it. I don't know. That was what my instincts told me happened. Now, if this person was a ne'er-do-well and who would take a child, right, from their family and, you know, 7 weeks later knows that the whole country is looking for this kid, they can't be a good person. They just can't be, right? So it's possible that he's still alive, but that he's in the hands of somebody who's not this young man's friend, and it does not mean him well. But just because that's what I think doesn't mean that's what it is, you know. But I wanted to express my thoughts and my feelings going into this reading because, you know, I want to put it out there that that's my bias. Now, when I do readings like this, it's not to see what the truth is or to say, oh, let's do a fortune-telling reading. It's just to consider things we haven't considered before. So perhaps by laying down a few cards, we can get a sense of the who, what, where, why, you know, and directions that we might consider looking in that we haven't looked in. And, you know, I wanted to put my bias out there because I don't want to, my bias, right, to indicate or be, you know, I don't want my reading to be, you know, infected by my bias. So for this reading, I've decided to use the first deck I've ever owned, the 1JJ Swiss Tarot. This particular one that I have was published in 1970 by A.G. Mueller, and I chose it because it's an atypical TDM tarot deck. And the young man that we're talking about and referencing in this reading is an atypical young man. So let's flip the camera. I'm going to go off. I'm going to go into my meditative place to most sincerely ask the universe for any information that may be helpful in redirecting how we're thinking or redirecting search efforts. You know, perhaps the right person might see this video and, you know, be in a position to redirect things if it sounds reasonable for them to do that. This is not a fortune-telling reading. This is not a reading to say this is absolutely what happened to this young man. It's just to consider possibilities. So let me go off into my meditative place. And when I flip the camera, I'm going to lay down 14 cards, which will be my, my signature spread. I always try to do a few shuffles on camera so that you know that this is not a staged reading. Ace of Cups, an emotional opportunity, the Fool, and Death. Two of Coins, Seven of Batons, 10 of Swords. The Star card. I need longer arms. Sorry about that. I'll rearrange it when I pull the Quint cards. Two of Swords and the Knight of Swords. Okay, now the quint cards, for those of you who are not familiar with my readings, this is a spread that I invented. I use it. I've been using it for years. It's a 9-card spread, as you can see, and I do quint cards whereby for each row I do a numerical assessment, and then I do one quint card for the entire spread. So I'm going to go off camera to do that, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so as you can see, the quint cards for each of the individual rows, starting with the top, was the Temperance card. For the second row, it's the Chariot. The third is the Sun. And the quint for the entire spread is the Moon. Now, sometimes I will read these cards, the quint cards for the entire spread, to kind of get the gist for the overall meaning of what went down. Now, for the quint for the entire spread to be the Moon card can be suggestive of a few things. It could be suggestive of look at that night. Look at every single possible clue from that evening that you can. Here you see that somebody is wooing somebody else, right? Is there a possibility that he was wooed in the evening? It kind of goes along with my bias that maybe he was wooed, right? So there's that, but I can't help but see that in this card. So this card is the quint for the whole reading. The reading hinges on either a nighttime event, whatever's being depicted in this picture, a mystery, perhaps it will never be solved. There's a few possibilities, and I think we should consider every one of them. Now, the quint for the top row is Temperance. Temperance can mean a couple things in the context of a question. It could mean water, a body of water, near water. It could be something turning out to be something different, right? We have a body of water we have a liquid being poured into another container, thereby changing what's in here. So it could be something that was done that changed. The original temperance, it literally meant temperance from alcohol, and the reference would have been, turning water, pouring water into wine to extend the wine, right? That's if you're going back to the origin story, that is what was indicated, as a virtue, back in the 1400s. So there's that, it's something, being changed. Maybe there was a plan that got changed. Maybe there was some kind of, but we can't take it to represent water, Here, where we see a row of strife, we have 7 of batons, we have 10 of swords, those are high-ranking cards of suits that could represent violence or somebody with a weapon. Or, if you look at these cards, they look like aggressive cards, but the row begins with 2 of coins, which is not. It's a peaceful. It's a peaceful card of partnership, right? The young man was barefoot, or at the most in stocking feet. Maybe he thought he was in a partnership or a friendship, maybe. Maybe he was, I don't want to say my bias. See, like this spread really addresses my bias. To me, I see my bias, and we have a car, if the car picked him up in his driveway, there wouldn't be any scent leaving the property, would there? So if there, so it's just so, it's just it's hard for me, to see, because I'm seeing I'm seeing what I'm thinking. In other words, it's also so if there's no scent picked up by this young man, maybe they picked him up at his house and there's no scent. Or maybe he wandered off without anybody, being involved. Maybe he got hit by a car and the person panicked and, put him in a body of water. I don't know. And then this row looks happy. We have a star of hope. The star card is a very hopeful card. It helps us find our way. We wish upon stars. We navigate the night, which is when he disappeared, by a star. And then the row, is finished with the sun card. So it's possible that there's something bad happened, but he's still alive, or that he can be found. There's a possibility, or there's a window of opportunity for finding him. Maybe he's, been damaged in some way. But this row is very hopeful because it really looks as though there's a chance. Now, I didn't address the top row where we see the death card. And yeah, the death card means death, among other things. It can mean the end of something. It could mean, it could mean the end of one's life if we're asking about that. But let's look at it and look at a few possibilities. Okay, we see an emotional opportunity, right? We see the Ace of Cups, an emotional opportunity. If he's unhappy, if he's discontent, he has some hope, right? He thinks that there's a chance. Maybe he wanders off. Now, I'm not saying that this is him because he's a fool, but it could be a person who is outside of, typical social standards. Now, when I was, teaching my daughter, going back a number of years, about tarot, and when this card popped up, and I explained to her that this person is sometimes seen as someone outside of typical human behaviors, she said, "Oh, just like Uncle so-and-so," which is the brother I've been referencing. And I said, yes, that could be one of the kind of people that this card represents. Somebody who's not typical, right? An atypical person. There are other ways to interpret this card, but in the context of the question, and knowing that the young man is atypical, it to me looks like the atypical young man had an opportunity, right? And he took it. Now, it may have been an unfortunate choice that maybe would bring his potential demise. Or it can also mean that after he took this opportunity, he realized it was not what he thought it might be. And so it brought an end to what he thought of as an opportunity. Do you see how that could be? So I definitely see this as the young man thought he had an opportunity, and he took it and was met with the distinct possibility that it wasn't what he thought. Now, Temperance, I guess, would also suggest that in some regard, because one thing is changed into another. So one of his preconceptions, his preconception of what he was doing turned out to be something else, which is a distinct possibility. I wouldn't necessarily interpret this to mean that he passed away or was harmed to that point of being no longer alive. I don't want it to mean that. And so I want it to look at it as meaning that it's more of like he had an abrupt understanding that what he thought was an opportunity really wasn't. And there was something that was different from, what it originally was. Now, These cards, if we're talking about a car, right, or a partnership, maybe somebody picked them up in the driveway, by the garage door. I mean, as I mentioned, my house is not too different from the house they describe. And I went on Zillow and I looked at their house and I saw the floor plan of their house, and it's not very different from mine. And it's possible that they went on a trip. Went by car, It would explain why there's no scent. If somebody picked somebody up in my house, in my driveway, I wouldn't know. By the garage, I wouldn't know. How would I know, Now, of course, okay, I would know because my house is alarmed and my house has cameras and, I'm protected to the hilt. However, this family maintains that there were no cameras and no alarms. So in a house that size, if somebody pulled into my driveway and somebody else got into the car, I would never know if it weren't for the fact that I had light sensors and cameras, and but otherwise I wouldn't know. So it's possible that these mean roads. This could, in the context of the question, this could be a crossroad. This could be tracks. We could also look at it trying to get meaning from, combining the 7 or the 10 with the suit, the respective suit that they're in. But I'm going on the visual on these because that's how they're striking me. So I'm seeing roads, or I'm seeing connections. This could even be internet. This could also be suggestive of somebody he met on the internet. See, I'm going into my bias, but that's what I'm seeing here. That's just, I'm seeing it. But these could represent like crossroads, a partnership, getting in a car, being taken someplace. Okay, let's look at this road, this row rather. So we have the Star card, Car of Hope, a card of direction. Again, another 2, so we have a partnership. Maybe he's trying to get away from the person who might have him, if that's the case. Which, of course, would result in a happy ending if he has been taken by somebody who meant him harm. Perhaps he is in the process of trying to escape, which would bring a happy outcome if he manages to do that. As for his parents, were they responsible, or were his mother and his stepfather responsible? I don't see any parental cards here that would suggest that they did something bad. They may not be nice people, but that doesn't mean they did that they did something to him. At the very least, they were negligent people, probably. They probably didn't take care of him in a way that was healthy for him. A lot of people say that the mother's response, let me flip the camera for a few minutes. A lot of people say that the mother's behavior is incompatible with being a good mother. But let's remember, the apple doesn't fall far from a tree, right? And if the young man has autism, it's possible that his mother also has atypical traits, for example, I'm a very affectionate person. I love who I love, but I don't have too many friends. I have 2 or 3 friends, that I have had all my life, or for the majority of my life, and I care about them and I keep in touch with them, but I don't see them day to day. The only people in my life that are my friends are my family, really. And when my mother died, as much as I cared for her and loved her, and I took care of her in hospice, and I arranged, all her appointments, and I took care of her, But when she died, I never cried. And I never cried for my father either. And it's not because I didn't love them, and it's not because I don't miss them. But tears just didn't come, And, a lot of people say, if that was me, I'd be crying my eyes out. And okay, my parents weren't my children, but I still loved them dearly, And so I don't know if it's my spiritual belief that I believe that they went someplace else. And if you've seen some of my videos, you understand what I think happens. So in some ways, I don't mourn because I feel like they're okay, But it would be a natural thing to cry because you realize you'll never see that person again. But I didn't. So her behaving in a different way could be that she's also, to some degree, atypical, And, let's go to the stepfather. Now, this is just me putting my 2 cents into it. By all accounts, he seems like he was really an unpleasant person. And by all accounts, it seems as though he probably was a controller, Maybe the wife was very easy to control, And so maybe, he's a controller and perhaps he is abusive. I'm not saying he is, but maybe that's a distinct possibility. And at any rate, maybe he wasn't an appropriate parent figure for this young man who has special needs, Excuse me. So maybe he wasn't an appropriate parent figure. And coupled with the mother who maybe, doesn't have atypical responses, and maybe she's not equipped herself to be a good parent. I mean, my mother was autistic, and she had challenges being a mother, and maybe Katie has challenges being a mother also. So maybe the conditions for this child were not ideal. And, that doesn't mean that they necessarily did something to hurt him. But maybe he took let's look at this spread again. Maybe if we keep that in mind, he saw an opportunity, to get out of a situation. And it didn't maybe work out to be the way he thought. But I think there's a chance for us to believe that there's still hope for him to be found. I think we have to focus on that evening, the events of that evening, to look at every detail we can on that evening and the facts about that evening. Perhaps the police or law enforcement aren't telling us everything, but because we know that now in this age of like YouTube people doing true crime, they don't put anything out there anymore, and that's why stuff gets, rumors get spread, and people come to conclusions, because when there's a vacuum of information, people want answers, and so they come up with answers. People do YouTube, tarot readings, because we want answers, so there's the calamity of not giving us information, and to go on, for the public who's interested and wants to see answers, they come up with scenarios, and at any rate, we have to stick to the facts of that evening, and, the possibility that there was another individual involved who wasn't the parents. I don't see parental people here. There's no parents here. So maybe we shouldn't be looking at the parents. Maybe the parents are a red herring. Maybe they weren't ideal parents. Maybe they weren't ideal people. Maybe they were despicable people. But maybe they're not the ones who are maybe they caused him to be unhappy, and maybe he did take off quickly. Maybe he couldn't get his shoes on because maybe, if he went into the area of the house where the shoes are kept, he would have woke his mother up. That's a possibility too. I mean, one of my idiosyncrasies, let's put it like that, is that the shoes have a place, and all our shoes go in a utility box. Nobody walks in my house with their shoes on, So, they're put in a box and they're in the utility room. So it's possible that for him to get his shoes, maybe the shoes were not in his bedroom. Maybe they were in another place and he would maybe wake her up. One of the things the mother did say is that she heard a thump, or she heard a loud noise, and she shouted to him, "Are you okay? Stop making so much noise," something like that. She didn't go into the room to investigate. She just said, "Hey, cut it out. Whatever you're doing, cut it out." So it was that kind of thing, which is, how many times do we say that to our kids? "What are you doing? Cut it out. Cut it out. Go to bed." That kind of thing. I mean, aren't we all guilty of having done that? Maybe, and he answered her. It's not like he didn't respond. He said, "Yeah, I'm fine," or whatever. So it's not like she didn't get an answer when she wasn't led to believe that he fell and got hurt, and then she, neglected to run in to see how he was. He said, "I'm fine," So maybe the noise she heard, maybe it was him trying to get out of the house. Maybe he, I don't know. Another thought that occurred to me was that maybe there's a crawl space in that house, or maybe in his bedroom, from his bedroom, maybe there's an attic thing, in the ceiling, and maybe he fell trying to get up there. I don't know. I mean, what would make a loud noise that would be unexpected? Is he trying to access a point? I'd be interested to know if there were any attic, access points in his bedroom, in his closet. Maybe there was a way through the bedroom closet to get to the garage, so maybe through the ceiling of maybe through the ceiling of a bedroom closet, he could access the garage, and through the garage get out of the house, without opening a window in his bedroom so that the window could remain locked. Nobody said whether or not the windows were unlocked, So they're not giving us a lot of information. So that would be helpful to know if a window was unlocked, but they're not saying, "Oh, the window was left open," So maybe that was something that happened. Maybe he was in his closet. I mean, I know in my house that we have ceiling access to the attic that definitely go to the garage, So, that's a possibility. It's not what the cards are telling me, but I'm trying to put together the information that we have from what the mother said and some of the clues in this spread. So it's possible that somebody picked him up, and it's possible that he's alive, and it's possible that he's trying to get away. And what we need to be putting our focus on is that evening, and all the events of that evening that are facts. They need to look at those to come up with a picture of what could have happened. I think, let me flip the camera again. I think if we look at the front and center card of the original spread, which would be the 7 of batons, right? Sometimes the front and central card is a card that a lot of the spread hinges on. And to me, I'm seeing it because it's in a row that culminates with a vehicle, that there's a crossroads or a point in a road. But these can also represent weapons, so it can also suggest foul play. I mean, the cards can mean more than one thing at any given time. So I don't know if this spread or this reading has shed any light on what happened. But I do think that it has generated a few thoughts, of what might have happened. I do think, though, I don't see parental cards, as I've said a couple of times. So I do think that this began as a result of the young man seeing an opportunity to flee. And then maybe because he doesn't see things, the way they were, he might have gotten himself into a pickle, And all this added information about his parents being, not good people or not good parents are red herrings. Maybe they weren't, and they probably weren't. I mean, it sounds as though there's enough shade been cast on them that they're questionable people, but that doesn't mean they did something. And I think this shows that he's trying to get away. There's, the star card is hopeful, right? Like navigate, try to find his way out. He's maybe trying to find his way out of the situation. He's trying to, this was, a more agreeable two, right? And this is more of an agitated two in the context of the question. So maybe now that he understood, at some point he understood that it wasn't what he had hoped or what he thought, and he is trying to escape, and maybe he will manage to escape. There's a possibility that he might, he will manage to escape. But what I ask any of you who are watching this and stuck with me for 57 minutes, thank you. But to keep this young man in your prayers. And if you live in that vicinity, if you see anything unusual, if you run into somebody in the supermarket who's kind of shady, maybe look at them, and, Koberger, not that he's necessarily guilty of the crime that he's accused of, but, even he, who is very, he's a strong suspect, right? Even he brought up the conversation of what happened, at that house in Idaho to his neighbor. He struck up the conversation with his neighbor. So what I'm trying to say is, if somebody or run into has, brings it up and for conversation, look at them and look at them more than just somebody who's striking up a conversation. You never know if somebody's involved in. So how would you know if somebody's involved in something like this? So consider everyone, consider everyone, and especially if you live in that area or in that vicinity. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be kind, and do no harm.